Welcome to another edition of the Hollywood Backlot. My special guest host is Holly Hurley from Worldviews.
Hello.
Welcome to the show, Holly.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this. This is going to be fun.
Oh yes, today's subject is shock cinema.
Shock cinema, shocking. Really.
Shocking.
I was shocked by some of the research I did for this show, quite
Yes,
frankly.
and it also shocked me too because I've seen plenty of these movies, and it can be a bit disturbing.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at B movies in a way because I just want before we get into the heart of the show, I'm shocked. I am shocked at shock cinema. Shock cinema has been the underbelly of film.
The dirty underbelly of film.
The dirty underbelly film, and plenty of actors, well-known names, had started in B movies.
Oh yes.
Which I'm surprised at because a lot of big-time names. The guy, which is actually up here, from Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee.
Yes.
I actually remember his name, Remo Williams, I believe his name is.
Mm-hmm.
He actually started in B films before he went to Enter the Dragon. What's surprising to me about B films is that B films have lasted as long as they have.
And you know what? I feel like they're on the grow.
Right.
You know, when I was still doing production, producing all that sort of stuff full time, there was a big discussion on: is everything going to go digital? Is everything going to go cheaper? Or are there still going to be the big blockbusters?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there has been an expanded amount of sort of B cinema, if you will, with the online community, because you can find anything now. You can watch these old movies. One of the movies we're talking about today, I actually watched The She Beast. I watched the whole thing on
You
YouTube.
saw that?
Yeah, I think it's really expanded the genre, and it's given it a marketplace in which the people who want it can get right to it.
Right. Well, what's funny about that is that it's I don't know what. I mean, did you go through a certain search engine to get the information, or where did you watch the video at?
I went all over, actually.
Really?
A couple of them I actually watched on demand on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
I watched one on YouTube. I got a couple of trailers online. I used Wikipedia to find, because a lot of them were under several titles.
Right.
That's what's great about me movies. You know, I mean, we're talking today about, what is it? Dream, Sweet, Sweet.
Oh,
Deadly Sweet. Deadly Sweet is actually under 3 different titles. The original Italian title, something like Con Cuomo, and then it's actually I Am What I Am, or you can find it under Deadly Sweet. And Deadly Sweet on Netflix, Con Cuomo on YouTube, and then on Wikipedia you find it, or under the IMDb film base you find it under I Am What I Am.
Right.
So you really, I mean, there are 100 places to find it, but you got to know how to look, right?
Right. And because the only place I could find the information for these films is actually the major influence for the show, for this particular episode, is the Shock Cinema magazine.
Now, do they still make Shock Cinema magazine? Do we know?
Yes, they do. Actually, there's a shockcinemamagazine.com, which actually provides full reviews of these things, full reviews of these movies, which is surprising though because the ones that I have seen, the ones that I was able to obtain. It was really hard to get on DVD, well, then again, I can't really blame anyone because the only thing is that they're not meant to be understood.
Right.
I mean, there's some really interesting political, controversial things that you can find in B movies. I mean, there's tons of them, but that's surprising.
Yeah. Because
they take a controversial twist other than the dynamic of being. You're not reading. You have to enter your head when you're watching one.
A little bit, yeah.
You can't have a full train of thought.
No, absolutely
because you just sit there. Because I remember the first time I reviewed a B movie, I could not figure that movie out, no matter what I did.
Yeah.
I mean, thanks to these guys who actually know how to watch a B movie, that was the only real legitimate resource I had to really understanding what these things were about.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I was also surprised about is some of the older ones that we're reviewing today. I think had they come out in a newer time period, they might not be considered B movies. They might be considered, when we're going to talk a little bit about this later, independent, but perhaps not even a B movie. The movie Voices was one of the ones that we're talking about today. Right. And Voices, I immediately thought, this could be a regular British cinema movie that would be released to a full audience in today's time period. Almost, especially the way it starts out. It starts out very simple, very British, and apparently it was based on a play.
Yes, it was. 1973.
Yeah.
But what's surprising on B movies have changed drastically. But these guys really cover the classics. That's why I turned to them, because they're not reminiscent of current times.
Yes.
And I think even going back 25 years, I think B movies are a lot darker. They played some overall. I mean, they have a huge following.
Yes.
But people have lost ties with B films.
Right.
I mean, and they've cut the ties because of, and like I said in my bio here of the show, the overview of the show, I said even, you know, a lot of these things have been banned from theaters because of language, violence, and a guy who's probably best known for B-movie cinema when it comes to westerns, Western B-movies,
yes.
Is that Sam Peckinpah, who did a bunch of his sheer violent, nasty, want you to turn your head. I remember that because I remember watching The Companion and I was freaked. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I could sit there and watch any violent movie that I want. It doesn't bother me an ounce. But that did a job.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. Well, and I mean, I guess we could dive right into the discussion here. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with question number one. Actually, I don't know if you thought. I mean, do you have, since you watched all these clips?
Whew.
I mean, you can even, doesn't have to be 5, but do you have any, like, say, after watching those clips, do you have like any particular favorites of those clips? Anything you wanted to see? You know?
I found The Crack in the World
Right.
really interesting. That would be on my top list. I think as far as like modern, sort of not necessarily B cinema, but there is certainly a vein of Korean film that runs that has been serving this population in today's times.
Right.
I would put Sympathy for Lady Vengeance or
Okay.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance on this list for
Right.
me. I mean, just boldly violent, but also very good plot lines, you know,
Yes.
but it comes about that just wanting to shock and disturb.
Right.
I think it comes right along line with that as far as like more modern sort of B cinema is concerned. And I found, I think I've got to put this on my like worst of the worst list. She Beast, man, that mask, that werewolf sort of half witch, half werewolf kind of appearance, that thing was just ridiculous. I mean, a lot of the gore in these films is really intensive and is really interesting.
Right.
But I found that particular mask just beyond the pale ridiculous. And I thought the ending of that one was very interesting. And I also like that Barbara Steele, a Fellini favorite,
Oh, yes,
was
that's right.
from 8½, was in this. And I noticed that a lot of actors who were very, very big, a lot of them folded into B cinema, even in the 70s, even in the 60s and 70s.
Right. Now, She Beast was probably one of the worst shock cinema. I mean, I've seen them better in shock cinema than that. And then, I mean, even some of the worst stuff that I've seen, I mean, even worse than She Beast. I mean, it's hard to, you know, they've done some horrible things.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like shock is concerned, I think it was just actually bad. That way, it was like shocking how bad some of the effects were, which I think is sort of the point in some B cinema. But I think particularly in this one, it was just poorly done, which was kind of hilarious to me.
Now, I have now a 10 list of a 10 list of recommended B-movie shock cinema films, and I was just wondering, did you have a chance to see the 1963 film Mystery Submarine?
I could not find Mystery Submarine anywhere. It was the ugliest battle that's ever taken place under the sea, I believe, is the catchline for that one.
Right. I mean, I only caught parts of it, and it is ugly. But I would have to say Mystery Submarine really does take the cake. I mean, I only saw like a 3-minute clip of it.
Yeah.
Whatever clip that was, it was the best clip because it was exactly what it meant. They went missing in this film. But the only time I could actually read anything about it was in the Shock Cinema magazine, where I can actually saw the conclusion.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and get to the point. Yeah.
Right, but it's really interesting. It's a really good early 1960s.
Yep.
Mystery film.
Well, now right around that time, I mean, I would love to talk a little bit. I mentioned Deadly Sweet earlier.
Right.
You know, it has several titles. Deadly Sweet had, you know, I Am What I Am and all of that. And the title in the trailer says, Can Ladies Kill? It's like the first thing you see. Or I like to call it, AKA Dirty Old Men Like to Have Sex with Really Young Women, which is all I got out of that entire piece. Was, wow, there's a lot, dirty old men really like to have sex with younger women. And that I think was like, you know, there was some interesting, I think there was some interesting sort of homage to late 60s cinema in that, though. I think it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? I think it was very representative of late 60s cinema at the time, between the ingenue and the way that she was, you know, dressed and sort of coiffed, and the way that people behaved, you know, sort of the over-the-top, like, slapping, and then the nightclub scenes, which was very, like, sort of pre-Palladium, you know, Studio 54 kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing, though. The nightclub scenes in some of these films are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're lit in a way where I mean, you cannot find more of a suspension, more, how do you say it, disturbing. I used that word already.
Yes.
But you cannot find better than B-movie cinema and how it's shot in a dim lit room.
Yes.
I mean, films like that. I mean, I think B-movies will, like I know I've said this already, but will continue to live on because they can be made out of what, $150, $200 budget.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, especially nowadays, all it really takes is, a nice HD camera and a room.
Right.
And that's really all you need. And if you have, and the sick mind and the sick fantasies, I mean, everybody's out there. You have probably, I'd say 1 in 3 people who have that beyond the pale idea. It's just a matter of accessing it and putting it on camera. And in today's world, a lot of that can be done in post-production too. I mean, if you have a really nice post-production suite, you can put in a lot of that, of the explosions and the gore and the over-the-top and the nudity. You can really work with that in post-production and make it almost a complete film, even on your own Apple laptop.
Right. Now, number 2, Frozen Alive.
Frozen Alive, or as I like to call it, the cryogenic love story.
Yes.
People were disappointed when this came out because they were expecting this huge sci-fi phenomenon with creatures from the dark, like a Black Lagoon kind of creature, but only a frozen Black Lagoon kind of creature. And they were really disappointed because it's really just a love quadrangle. It's just this big, unrequited love story that puts this main character, I think if it were made today, it might do quite well, actually, puts this main character, Helen, in a very tense situation between the scientist and his wife, who then commits suicide. I mean, just a hot mess, but obviously with lots of latent sexual tension and really before its time technology kind of curiosity. Because I think the love of cryogenics the movie Forever Young with Mel Gibson in the 80s was based around the, a love story with sort of a similar theme. And I think cryogenics has still infinite curiosity.
Well, it provokes a lot of infinite curiosity, and I think Frozen Alive is the definition of, I think that's the word, definition of cryogenics.
Yes.
it really, it doesn't give you a good perspective on cryogenics.
Yes. Yeah. No, not at all. It is sort of the beginning, if you will. And actually, Elaine Fraser, who wrote the story, wrote 2 more versions basically of this after this, and tried to get them produced and tried to get them big. Apparently, she just was so caught up on this cryogenic love story theme, she couldn't let it go. And this was just the introduction to that for her.
Right. And I mean, I think even the just Frozen Alive was actually one of the other titles as well. It had other, I just can't remember the name, the alternatives, but there used to, but surprisingly, it's okay, that's all right. Surprisingly, it's just how many names it develops over the years. How many times? Because I've seen some in there, AKA, it could be one thing and then AKA something else, and AKA something else. And
and I think a lot of B movies go through that transformation. I think what's interesting about Frozen Alive, as I was watching it, I realized, I was like, there's something that feels just utterly familiar about this. And sure enough, I found out it was directed by Hitchcock's DP.
That's right.
Bernard Knowles, and this was his introduction to directing his own film, and obviously it became a B movie, so it is what it is, as well as he did. But I thought that was really fascinating because a lot of these B movies, we're going to talk about another one a little bit later, the Speed Driver, used either Hitchcock actors, Hitchcock DPs, Hitchcock crew. He really, I think, opened the door for B movies in a lot of ways.
Bernard Knowles is a very important figure in B movie cinema, and especially in the shock cinema genre. B movies would not be where they are if it wasn't for Bernard Knowles. Yeah. I mean, there's always Hitchcock, who always did the major Hollywood films, the major horrors. But when you could talk about B movies, shock cinema, Bernard Knowles is the man himself.
Yeah, he's the one to go to.
Yes, he is. I really appreciate his work.
Now, is he one of your favorites? Do you have favorite directors?
If it comes to DPs, yes. He is, actually. He is one of my favorite directors. He's done some great stuff. He's DP cum director. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
But what's so great about him is that I can't say he's a founding father of B movies. I can't say that. But I can't go that far. But I can certainly say he is one of the influences behind, watching these films, or more major influence for me to watching these films.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where most don't go, I do.
Yeah, which is great. You sort of forge ahead that way.
Oh, number 3.
The Carrie treatment, right?
1972.
Blake Edwards. Yes, and this one is a lot of sex, but what I loved about this one, James Coburn.
Yeah, surprisingly enough.
Young, sexy James Coburn. Sex, abortion. I mean, these were taboo topics in the 70s.
Yes, it was.
This was really serious.
But Coburn was a genius. Coburn started in the right place at the right time. Early 70s B-shock cinema.
Yeah.
Perfect place to be. Because these things were getting major audiences. I mean, it surprises me how many people want to watch this stuff. I mean, or read about it.
Yeah, obviously. Well, it has a huge, I mean, they call it a cult following, but I think when it comes to B cinema, when it comes to shock cinema, is the definition of cult following. I mean, they pretty much created, cult followings. Right.
Right. It's. I mean, they were the influences behind you sitting there and wanting to be like, ugh. Why did I come today? Why did I pay the $5?
I'm never going to be able to erase this from my brain.
Exactly.
Yep.
It was. He devised the world that we live in as far as cult cinema.
Yeah.
He really did. I mean, he came in the great time. I think he began in 1962, and he hasn't stopped since.
Well, and I have to say, the way that he played the character in this film made it feel unlike shock cinema. It made it feel just like a good movie. Right. It made it feel like it lent some legitimacy to what an otherwise sort of unrealistic, wild, and crazy story. Right.
But see, the thing is that I think the director behind that is also a genius by himself.
Yeah.
Just on his own. I think he picked a great cast. He picked some young stars that now are legends of the big screen and in major motion pictures. But he came in at a great time. And he left at a great time, too, because B-movie cinema, with all the advances in technology, was kind of falling by the wayside anyway. I mean, yes, it's still there. There's still a cult following, but people follow it all the time. But B-movie cinema had kind of taken a turn for, kind of taken a dip, because people didn't want to watch sheer violence or chaos. They weren't interested in it. They wanted to see something funny. They wanted to go see a comedy on the big screen and on the THX screen.
Yeah.
They weren't looking to, make themselves sick.
Yes, exactly. And I think also when you talk about sort of how B movies have continued into this new era, I think we're going to talk about it a little bit when we get to the last horror film, Trauma. Trauma has had a big role in continuing shock cinema and B-movie cinema and bringing back these old films, as well as creating new ones for the people out there who may be my age and looking for something new that'll make them sick. Poltergeist, that sort of thing. Yeah.
But so Trauma is one of the founding, you can't get past Trauma.
No.
If it wasn't for Trauma, you wouldn't get, what was it called? Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of it now. Did you ever see The Toxic Avenger?
I haven't seen The Toxic. Actually, I've seen parts of The Toxic Avenger. That's not true.
It's a modern day. What was that? The comedy horror thing with the zombies.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble remembering the name of it. But it reminded me.
Oh, are you talking about the Simon Pegg film?
Yes.
Which we're going to talk about someone who actually ended up in a Simon Pegg film a little bit later. One of the stars of one of our other movies. But yeah, I think it was not Living Dead. There. It was the one before Hot Fuzz.
Right.
And all of a sudden
I can't remember.
We'll get there.
Yes.
We'll get there. We'll get back there. But you got to talk about Simon Pegg when you talk about the continuation of this genre, because it was his door to Hollywood.
It was.
Now he does all kinds of legitimate things, but he and his partner decided basically to make
Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead. There we go. To make Shaun of the Dead and open that door.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now the number 4.
Yes.
The Bionic Boy.
Okay, was Carole King in The Bionic Boy?
Yes,
Did I blink, or was Carole King in The Bionic Boy?
She was in The Bionic Boy.
Whoa.
Yes.
So now this one was Leo M. Diaz. Now, do you know anything else about any of the rest of his work, Diaz?
I've heard the name. I've heard the name being spread around, but I don't know a lot about his work. What I should have done is there was a book on him, which I just saw yesterday. Yeah. But it did not hit me to actually go ahead and read the book.
Of course not. Well, not yesterday before the show today, but tell me a little bit about The Bionic Boy.
The Bionic Boy is very simple. It was like what do you call it? It's like The Bionic Man.
Yes. Now, there was a spin-off episode of The Bionic Man with The Bionic Boy,
Yes,
right?
it was.
Okay.
There was The Bionic Woman and went on from there. And they even had a short-lived thing called The Bionic Dog.
Oh, wow.
Which I've never seen. Okay, I don't know why. It's like what do you call it?
When you talk about jumping the shark, I think the Bionic Job would be the Bionic Dog would be an excellent.
I don't even know if it even exists.
Yeah.
But I just heard about it, so that's why I'm mentioning it.
Yeah.
It was a short-lived 1-hour thing.
Yeah.
No one took a liking to it at all. I mean, it was like looking at Benji.
Yes.
It's like looking at Benji, but with powers.
Yeah, that's a bit much. I mean, I could see how it would be popular, but that's a bit much. Yeah.
Now, early '80s, 1980, number 5.
Yep.
Speed Driver.
Speed Driver. Now, is this the one with? Is this the one with? Nope, that's not the one. That'll come later. Unzip Me Babe. Was that which one had Unzip Me Babe as the key line? I'm gonna find it.
I don't remember.
It was The Naked Target.
That's right, The Naked
Target.
And I had it right here too.
Yep, with Unzip Me Babe,
Right.
and that one starred Norman Bates, the original Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins.
1992.
Yep, and you're watching it and you're going, wow, this is terrible, but is that Anthony Perkins? Like,
Yes.
it was just ridiculously silly. I mean,
It was. But Anthony Perkins I really like.
Yeah.
He just done some terrible stuff.
Yeah, but but he's interesting to watch, even as a
Right.
ridiculous character
Oh,
like
he does.
this one.
But he's so good at it though.
Oh, yeah,
These little
so
psychopath, little head comatose, little guys, that are either violent or mean-spirited, or they have some kind of deficiency.
Yes, yes, and he's good at that.
Yes,
he's very
is.
good at that. And he just has some gravitas. You just want to watch him when he's on screen, even if he's pulling off his own hand or or crashing a car or acting like a maniac. You're drawn to Anthony Perkins. You're like, I just want to see what this crazy man is going to do next.
Right.
And it'll keep you watching something that otherwise you go, ugh, and turn away from.
Right. But when you get a star like Anthony Perkins, I don't know if you ever saw it, and I guess it falls underneath the genre. It's Perkins 16, Perkins 14.
No, but I saw something about this,
Right.
but I don't know anything about it other than the title.
Okay, I saw it just like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Perkins is disgusting.
Of course.
I don't get me wrong. It wasn't because it was a surprise. I say it because there's a bunch of people gotten trapped in these cages, metal cages underneath some guy's basement for some kind of podiatry experiment. Some weird. It grossed me out.
Yeah.
I mean, I could not encage in these dog cages. I mean, it's like, all right, fella, let him go, will you?
Yeah, that's just a terrible thing. I'm sorry, but you were talking about Speed Driver, which was 1980s.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about Speed Driver. I know it's huge on the torrent sites.
Yes, it was.
It's Stelvio Massey.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And but I don't know. I haven't been able to access. I don't download illegally. Let it be known. So although it is only on the torrent sites, I have not been able.
I haven't seen the whole thing. I only saw the opening.
Yes.
Just to be honest, 'cause I don't know anything about the film aesthetically as far as just the opening.
Yes.
But from what I saw of it, I mean, Speed Driver there's a crash course in how not to drive.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good. And I do feel like a lot of these are like with a traditional horror format, you're talking about a lesson learned. Like, don't go to Transylvania with your wife to a city where
there's no lessons learned in shock cinema. There's none. Okay, even in some of the early, what's his name, who did Shivers, and my mind just is not working today. But early 70s film, I mean, Shivers was the definition of Cronenberg.
Yes, yes.
David Cronenberg, who probably has done over 300 films.
Well, and I think when movie people talk about Cronenberg,
Yes.
I mean, he really invented a lot of things that have become tradition, even
Right.
in regular cinema.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because when it comes to B-movie cinema, shock cinema, Cronenberg invented the way you watch Shivers, the way you watch a lot of films. The Last House on the Left.
Yes, Last House on the, and there's been a remake since then.
A terrible
Apparently
remake.
not as sick as the original. The original is supposed to be the sickest.
Well, the
really
original
most
is just
disgusting.
nothing. I mean, I only watched it once.
Yeah.
And at times I still have nightmares over it because
Yeah.
I can't get it out of my
Well,
head.
I mean, it's sick and disgusting, and it's another one of those things that puts yourself into that. The thing about shock cinema that I love is it puts yourself in that position you never want to be in.
Right.
It is, you go to the nth degree of the most difficult, miserable, gory situation you can think
Right.
of, and you just take it even further.
Well, see, that's the thing. That's what I love about shock cinema.
Yeah.
It's to the extreme, or it's not just to the extreme. You're standing at the ledge and you just jump.
Yeah, you jump right off. You just jump right off. You're like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to
Right.
go all the way there, which is a big one.
Now, the one that you and I want to talk about is number 6.
Deadly Sweet. Yes, the 3 title, the original German, I
Right.
Am What I Am, Tinto Brass.
Exactly.
I mean, 60 cinema to the nth degree. But I gotta say, after I saw that trailer, I thought, I want to get that haircut.
Yes.
That girl, ridiculous.
Yes.
Ridiculously beautiful, ridiculous looking. But there was a great website. There's an Italian cinema website, and they called it Il Cinema Pre-Erotico.
Right.
So it was like the sort of the precursor to erotic cinema. And this was sort of it was sort of a beginning of something in a
Yes,
lot
it
of
certainly
ways.
was. But see, I like Deadly Sweet because it broke through barriers. Didn't get a lot of recognition, but it broke through barriers. maybe people don't want to acknowledge the fact that I did.
It watches like a regular late 1960s film,
Yes,
like
it
a
does.
regular late. I mean,
Yes.
maybe it's a little bit horror, it's a little bit comedy,
Right.
and it's a little bit regular drama. I mean, it's got this Lolita vibe going through it that
Right.
is very, very poignant and also very real. That leads you to not only see the flaws in the character,
Right.
but also sort of the flaws in society. Which again, we're not supposed to learn lessons from shock
Right.
cinema, and that I think made it break boundaries.
Now, number 7,
Yes.
the last horror film.
A slasher film within a slasher film.
It certainly was, and it was a good one too. I loved it. It was creepy as all hell. Excuse me, but yeah, it was a devastating movie. It was a horror movie and a horror movie.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the last horror film?
Well, what I found specifically interesting about the last horror film was it took it really, I think, I mean, I don't know if it was the first, but it certainly was a very clear example of that whole movie within a movie kind of idea.
Right.
But what I liked about it was it took someone who was actually a scream queen at the time, and it cast her as a scream queen, playing a scream queen. Like, I love that it was like 3 layers of sort of stalker,
Right.
because you have this feeling that, like, both in the movie and in her real life, she's being stalked. You have this feeling that both in her character and in her real life, she's going through this. But all that on top of, just ridiculously grotesque, beheadings and the makeup and it was so ridiculous. It was like unbelievable, you know?
Yeah, I've known people who came out of just out of not regular B horror movies, but
Right.
regular horror movies, sick to their stomach.
Yes.
But these will either offend you or make you want to walk out.
Yes, absolutely. But I think the premise of this one is so simple.
Right.
It takes you out of your reality a little bit, because it takes you. You think of someone like Jamie Lee Curtis, our sort of my era's
Right.
original scream queen, from the original Halloween on through. And you think about the movies like H2O that were made about stuff like this happening to her, or, they do Nightmare on Elm Street does that throughout its own series.
Right.
But what I liked about this movie was it was very simple in its premise. It took a very simple premise. A lot of these have, we're going to talk about the Sinful Dwarf next.
Yes.
A lot of these movies have kind of ridiculous premises that are
Right.
then blown up to ridiculous places. This is a simple premise.
Okay.
It's a simple, straightforward premise with a lot of gore packed
Right.
into it.
It was.
It just gets you the most gore for your simple plot, which I liked.
Oh yeah, because going back to what you had just said earlier about some of these original scream queens of their time. I mean, wow. I mean, no one screamed louder than Curtis did.
Yeah, no, Curtis had the best scream.
Yes.
She has the best scream. Yeah.
Just a little something there, just because they sometimes I would watch some of these films and they have the best script. It makes you want to actually cover your ears.
Oh, I love when you see the red carpet footage of Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
When you get that one real fan, that one horror fan, who'll be
Right.
like, all right, I want to hear the scream. And even today, she has still got the best scream.
She does.
I mean, it is legend,
It
and
certainly
it's
is.
beautiful. And I believe her name's Jenna Jalbert.
Yeah, that's right.
If I'm clear. In this one, I think she really lived up to her name as
Right.
as a scream queen. And I think you really did get the most gore for your buck.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
And actually, the next film is the Escapees, but we're going to get back to that.
AKA The Runaways,
That's
or
right.
Le Petit something je m'aime, but this is basically another premise of you have gorgeous
Right.
young females having lesbian sex.
Yes.
They just also happen to be crazy.
Exactly. But we're going to get back to that just in a minute,
Yeah.
because the one that we want to talk about,
Yeah.
not to skip the Escapees,
Right.
but the Sinful Dwarf.
Oh my gosh, this was Grindhouse. This was what Grindhouse of today's audience is.
It is.
Even if the director who did Amelie did something like the Meat House or something like that shortly
right.
after with the little guy from Amelie, and I feel like a lot of that was based on this movie.
Right.
Very sick pretense, and then you sort of get into it, and it gets even more complex for like no reason. It's like it's not so simple that you just are killing people and torturing them. It's like you're turning them into heroin addicted prostitutes. Like it just goes from very simple to very complex, and then there's also a dwarf,
Right.
a really sick little sadistic dwarf.
Right.
And his mother, who is even worse, which
Yes.
I believe pulls in the Psycho concept of
Right.
crazy son, crazy mama.
You know what it reminds me of is Psycho.
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of comparisons there to Psycho.
Yeah. It is a less palatable version of Psycho.
Very much so.
Very much less
Very much so,
palatable.
but I think it was dirtier.
Oh, much dirtier.
I mean, because you're right. The Sinful Dwarf is the equivalent, or the smaller equivalent of Psycho. It's I I really do think
smaller in 2 ways.
Yes, I agree fully. Less in production cost.
Yes.
1, and 2. I think it was actually, honestly, nothing can be scarier than Psycho.
Right.
But I think the Sinful Dwarfs it has a sick element to it.
Yeah, it was a sicker concept.
Yes.
Because it's not just so simple as like torture and kill.
Right.
It is sort of beyond torture and kill. You're reaching
Right.
beyond torture and kill to torture and ruin. It's like not even kill. It's like you keep them alive to ruin them, which is like just.
But that's what's so much. So if you have a short fuse,
yeah,
and you just want to see something dismembered or have, you can watch any one of these and you can just be, oh, I feel so much better now.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was really violent,
Yeah.
and I got what I was looking for.
Exactly. Now, just to go back for a second.
Sure.
The escapees.
Yes, so our French runaway queens,
Yes.
our tiny little French runaway queens, and their lesbian sex.
Yes.
And this was Jean Rollin.
Yep.
And
correct.
French originally.
Right.
And actually, I wasn't able to find this one anywhere online.
Actually, I only saw part of it.
See, these are difficult. Some of these are actually
Right.
difficult to procure.
Right.
Mostly, they exist still in VHS in pawn shops, and I think this would be. I think perhaps if we lived in France, this might be easier to find because I had a lot more trouble. I actually had a difficult time finding it under its French title. The best luck I had was once I figured out the translation into the Runaways as
Right.
opposed to the Escapees. But then you have to avoid all the Joan Jett biopics.
Yes.
And then that just drives you to a whole nother level.
Oh, it does, because I had trouble finding it.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried going through these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not for that particular film, but I've gone through them to get other stuff because they get to review all this stuff.
Yes.
And I try to get even before today's show, I wanted to watch more of these again so I can have a better fix of doing this show today. But the stuff is so hard to come by.
Yes. Yes.
And even they were skeptical of actually lending the stuff out because how do you find another copy of it?
Yes, exactly. And it's like you don't want to legally make copies, especially of something
Right.
that has a low production value and low royalties.
Right.
So you run into this. How do you find a distributor in this particular time? And if any of you are out there watching and you have a great B movie distributor,
Right.
Touch base with us because this is something obviously that's of great interest to Dan, our cinema maven. So
Number 10. Probably one of the worst films of all time.
Oh boy, and I got to
The
watch the whole
She-Beast.
thing. Like I said,
Yeah.
the whole thing's on YouTube, and you have to watch a couple commercials, but it's well worth the experience. I think from the get-go, you feel bad a little bit for Ian Ogilvy and Barbara Steele because you have this tremendous acting in this absolutely terrible movie. I mean, it's so bad. And the premise of, the witch from the beginning. I mean, my question is, I love how they drowned her, but also she's also supposed to be a vampire as well as a witch.
Right.
But like drowning and stakings, so you have to do
Right.
like both, but you don't want to kill the wife, so you don't
Right.
stake her. I think the premise is flawed from the get-go with the witch vampire combo.
Right.
I mean, it was so bad, but yet so much fun to watch.
The Sheepies, the only time I saw it was out of Mills Production. They come in these 20 packs.
Yeah.
And it's the only time I actually got to see the Sheepies because I couldn't find it anywhere. Not on VHS.
Yeah.
Or on, there was an older model of that somewhere, but
Beta.
Yeah, Beta, all that sort of thing. I could not find it anywhere. But once that 20 pack came out for $20, I got to see 50 movies.
Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah, and include the She-Beast, which I wanted to see, and then I realized just how bad it truly is.
Okay, my favorite part of the She-Beast is it tries really hard to be. I almost think it doesn't quite succeed as a B movie because it tries really hard to pull in all the elements, but there is sort of. You miss a little bit of the gore in this one. You miss a lot of the gore, but you have your voyeuristic innkeeper, which is a standard shock cinema fixture, just for no reason. The guy has like no place in the script except to be a voyeur.
Yes.
Like that's really his only job.
Yeah.
And you have a dwarf at the beginning who warns everybody, don't do this, don't do this. And the dwarf is supposed to, he's the voice of reason in the beginning, and then he never plays a part again. You have like a random dwarf, which is again, something we love in our shock cinema.
Right.
And then and I love that it's the dwarf warns, she'll be forever in our midst. It's like it's trying really hard to be a Transylvania drama, but it really is just for all intents and purposes, just totally a B movie, bad movie.
It really is a B movie all
But I got to say, my favorite line in the end is, I'll be back. It's just too good. I just couldn't, oh, you didn't hear me clearly? I will be back. That was my favorite.
Now, to get to some of the questions.
Yes.
If the world didn't have the low-budget flicks, where would moviegoers go to obtain the sense of obscure cinema?
Well, I don't think it, I mean, you can tell me even better
sure.
this, but I think the difficulty, it's always been difficult. You know, I grew up in a very small town in East Texas.
Right.
And even before the internet was the, plethora of, the easiest place to find things, where you can almost get it from anywhere, if you know who to ask. I feel like there are areas in which this need goes unfed.
Right.
And I actually think it's unfortunate. I know that sounds silly, but I think there is a certain part of society that can be fed by this sort of voyeuristic fun. But I do feel that there are places where it can't be obtained, and there's nothing to be done about it.
Well, that's the thing, because if B-movie cinema completely leaves our earth, that's the thing, though, because without B-movie cinema, you wouldn't... I don't know. There's always the major Hollywood films. You can always turn to them to fulfill your need of horror.
Right.
But there's nothing in the world, and I think you can in a way kind of agree.
Yeah.
That there's nothing like a B-movie shock cinema to really.
Nope. And the thing about it is if you look at guys like Simon Pegg, if you look at I figured out who it was when we were talking about Crack of the Earth. Right. The leading female in Crack of the Earth was in Simon Pegg's How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. Really? Because they are such big shock cinema fans. Right. And there have been other chances of there have been other B-movie actors that they have pulled into their movies. Right. If you look down their list of movies, they are constantly looking to hire. Barbara Steele and Ian Ogilvy are still acting. Yep. And a lot of, as you said, that started a career for a lot of these people, but I think they also have trouble breaking out of it. Yes. Because I do think that this is a need that has to be filled. But I think it is a need that will always be filled by new directors, because they're always interested in someone making something sick. Even if they've never seen a shock film, I think there are people who will have these ideas, and they will come to fruition, they will come to film. Right. I don't think it can ever truly die, but I do think it's unfortunate there are places where people will think this is their first time to see it. Right. And then they'll get older and they'll find these things out there, and they'll be like, oh, someone gets me. Right. 1968, they got me,
Now, this has nothing to do, I'm just going to get off track just for a second.
Oh, go right ahead.
There's a really interesting website out of Berlin called Lost Films. And I know the director who runs the organization. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with horror movies, but what's interesting is I wish they had the same kind of idea for shock cinema. Yeah. Because they obtain old articles of films and titles that I never even heard of. Yep. And they bring them to fruition, and they show them to the public. Yes. And there's no real. There's an audience for that sort of thing when it comes to archivists and people.
But they're always going to be a smaller audience.
Oh, they always will be. But the thing of the matter is that I wish they had that for B movies. Yep. Because even if you find a really good movie, you have a place to go to watch it. Yes. Even though it's already out in Berlin, but still.
Well, I do. I think that there is something that we are missing. When I lived in the Village in New York, there are places you can go to see B movies in a theater, still in a bar, or like there are places where they'll play these movies, in bars while other stuff is going on. But, you really have to search to find those places. And I think outside of the major cities, there aren't places for that, because there just isn't a need for it. There's not a demand, supply and demand. There aren't enough people in a small town. There may be one out of every 25,000. Right. Whereas in a big city like New York or Berlin, you're talking, quite a few. That would be 25,000 out of a billion, and that makes a big difference.
It certainly does.
And I think that's the difficulty, is finding the right place to show it and allowing that to be accessed by the right people. Right.
Now, did you ever see, it's not on my list or anything, but did you ever see The House of Laughing Windows?
I haven't seen The House of Laughing Windows.
No. It's really interesting because it's an old deserted house. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that it's an old Italian horror movie. But the scary part about it is that it doesn't have to be ultra violent to give you that same disturbed feeling. Again, the same disturbed feeling as you would see in a big horror movie. Yeah. And what's interesting is that you don't know it's the same guy playing the two roles. Yeah. The gentle, relaxed, minded social worker, but then you get this, then you get to see the other side of him. But you don't see that other side until the very end. That he's the same guy that's been killing everybody the entire time.
And see, that's the kind of thing that really,
Right.
you know, I mean, that's what I think movies like Scream, and I think Wes Craven has tried many times
Right.
to kind of sort of find that in his
Right.
movies. I think a lot of people have tried to kind of find that in their movies, and it's difficult because you always want to give a hint, you always want to foreshadow,
Right.
and sometimes it's better if you don't foreshadow it. You know, there was a character in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, very similar, very friendly, very soft-spoken, and then he ends up being the bad guy, you know,
Right.
and you wonder sometimes, there's obviously an appeal for that. And is, you know, I feel like in our cinema they try to make it too palatable, and you try to prepare your audience so they're not so shocked.
Right.
But the whole point of shock cinema
Yes,
is
it
to
should be
shock,
shock,
and
yes.
sometimes you want to be shocked.
Right.
You know?
But see, my recommendation to people who do that,
Yeah.
who don't think they have to add the shock value, but if you're going to be a part of the shock, cinema field, or be part of that genre, you're going to have to understand that people are going to be expecting some form of shock of one way or the other.
Exactly. And if they don't get their shock, that I think is where I think the whole she beast for me fell a little bit short. Or even, I mean, Cracking the World I thought was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. But my favorite part about that was, you know, the end where it says it ends in the fiery birth of a second moon.
Right.
You know, like that was something I read one reviewer say that I
Right.
totally agreed. I was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And the shocking part about it was seeing your world split in half and become a moon.
Right.
But that was not really enough shock considering they were sticking atomic bombs into the core of the Earth.
Right.
You know, like, what do you expect to happen?
Do you watch a lot of Sci-Fi Channel?
I watch little Sci-Fi Channel, but
Okay.
I do watch a little Sci-Fi Channel.
They have some of the worst shock cinema ever.
I think it's wonderful that they've gotten into that. I
Oh, it
feel
is.
like the Sci-Fi Channel struggled for years to find what was the right thing for this
But see,
audience.
it's gotten worse though, because they don't provide what. It used to be so good because you used to get that space. What's it called? It ran for 3 seasons back in the early to mid. I should say mid to late 90s.
Battlestar Galactica?
Not Battlestar. That was 80s. But it came Farscape.
Okay.
I thought that was one of the best little sci-fi shows on the market.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't need a Battlestar Galactica to satisfy your sci-fi or horror needs. I thought Farscape, not to get totally off topic, but it had a relatively good aspect to it because at parts were kind of frightening. Yes, I mean it's not exactly what you call shock cinema,
Right.
but just to get off that shock cinema, it had an element of, how do you guys say it? It lived up to its. It was Farscape.
Yeah.
It goes to the farthest reaches of the universe to obtain a certain sense of scare.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and I think people who enjoy sort of going to the furthest reaches can enjoy that sort of feeling. I mean, I don't know what the direct connection is, but I have to say those of us who are a little bit sci-fi nerds can also tend to get into shock cinema because there is a part of you that goes, I want to see the ridiculous of that.
Right.
Now, there are obviously, you have people like Rodriguez and you have people like Tarantino, and we've mentioned Simon Pegg, who bring back elements reminiscent of shock cinema, and obviously the director who did Amelie occasionally gets into that. What are your thoughts on those people bringing those reminiscences back? Do you think they're sort of softening the genre for a modern day audience to make big blockbusters?
It's like the best take I can give on that is that, did you ever see those movies that try to be reminiscent of those classic or legendary shows of yesteryear? I remember they tried to do. There was a couple of them that I really did not like, but it reminds me of that. They've weakened the genre.
Yeah.
They've taken something that was so good, and they just simplified it to a point of it's ununderstandable. They didn't have any. I mean, I'm not really blaming them. If they can't bring back some of the original cast, I can understand that. But
I think at times they've tried.
They've tried, but I don't think they tried hard enough to. How do you bring back? I'm trying to remember. It was Bill Cosby. He did this little crime caper, and it was for a couple seasons. But I thought it was so. I think he won like 3 Emmys for that show.
I love Bill Cosby in any genre. Bill Cosby himself was my first stand-up comedy experience. I think he is, I mean, on video, VHS obviously. But I mean, he is to me a master of what he did. I think he's masterful. I think he's underrated, actually. But
he's underrated in a good way.
Yes.
because I think his work will always stand out as not just legendary but influential.
Yes.
But I think he kind of ran the gamut a little bit too much, because he hit the same subjects over and over.
Right, but I also think some of that is staying with what you know, and I think some of that is that you do get pigeonholed, and I think a part of it is too that because people turn to him for the kind of advice of the things he's passionate about, I think he followed that. But I also think we're terribly off topic now.
Yeah. Oh no, I understand. It's just that the reason I got off is that I wanted to give another, how you say it, another venue where people can go to you might be able to run into some of these things.
Yeah.
But on the Sci-Fi Channel, well.
Yeah. Well, people try. They really try.
Now, who is your favorite B-movie director?
Oh, see, now this, I couldn't choose one director. I don't think I know, honestly, I don't think I know enough about the genre. I think when you have people who are serious about gore, they have a favorite director. I have some favorite movies that I like, that I've enjoyed, both newer and older, but I think that I like my shock with a spoonful of sugar. Right. I like my newer Korean cinema with a little plot to go with it, with an understandable reason why all of this is happening. I like that. Whereas I think real shock cinema fans don't like that. And I don't even feel like I could be qualified to choose a good director. Right. But I bet you could.
Well, that's the thing, though, because if I was going to watch shock cinema, I don't need any sugar to cover up,
exactly.
to make the tea sweeter.
Yeah.
Because I don't need that. I mean, it's interesting because I even had trouble back in my early days of reviewing the films.
Yes.
But I don't need the cup of sugar or the little sweetener to sweeten it up. Or I don't even need the plot line even.
Yeah.
Just show me some good shock. Make me want my palms sweat. I'm good.
Yeah. So who does that for you? Who's the best director?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I guess if I had to choose, I'd go with Bernard Knowles because I think he formats things in a way that I can watch.
Right.
I think second to that, you might go with some of the Italian guys. I loved the Deadly Sweet. I think it was altogether a very dirty exploration, but I think something that was to me palatable in a way because it sort of explores something that is nasty, but in a very small part, very uncomfortably true.
But see, that's the thing about shock cinema. It will surprise you.
Yeah.
It will have elements of realism.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that because it adds to the gore. It adds to because there's some understanding of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about shock cinema because it will surprise you politically.
Yes.
It will surprise you socially.
Yes.
And it obviously has shocked me, so it does its job.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So who's your director?
My director. I'm sorry. I would have to say.
He's evading my question.
No, I'm not. I promise you, I'm not. But I would have to agree with your selection of Bernard Knowles.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with that. I mean, I could run off a 10 list, but I think if I was going to pick a number one pick, Bernard Knowles would be it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Next question.
Well, I mean, I thought we were out of questions, but.
I have it right here if you want.
Go for it.
Does mindless entertainment always so senseless, but does shine through with controversial elements at times?
Now, this question I didn't fully understand.
Okay, sure. I'll be happy to explain it.
Go for it.
I've always found entertainment, I mean, it's like looking at Hollywood cinema.
Yes.
It's mindless. I've watched a couple comedies on the big screen, and with all their hard work, they don't pull out anything that's at least halfway decent.
Yes.
It's like with the sequels from Halloween. Well, we got 10 sequels of Halloween, but what did we get for it?
Well, some of them were good.
Halloween
5 was excellent.
I didn't think Halloween 5 was excellent.
Oh, are you kidding me? I loved that when I was like 8. And I think if you were scared by something when you're 8, it's purely a good horror movie.
It is, but it's pure horror when you're a kid.
Yes.
But
yes.
The only thing is that we got nothing out of the next 9.
Right.
Because I thought that bringing him into space in number 10 was just.
Okay, I think space is a little bit much. Yeah. I don't enjoy now. I know that I am in the small portion because I feel like people who like shock cinema B movies enjoy things like Aliens versus Predators. I also don't like Jason versus Freddy. I do not like when you take two masterful psychopaths and you pit them at each other. The whole point of a psychopath. I love like the whole Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs. Like I think Silence of the Lambs. I love psycho thrillers, which is why Hitchcock for me was much more my speed. read
Right.
growing up, because I like thinking. I like being engaged. And I think the problem with a lot of horror, I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes I go in for the scream cinema.
Right.
I go in for, movies where afterwards you're checking under your car and you're looking for the guy with the hook, and you keep looking in your back seat. I go in for that, don't get me wrong. But I think that Hollywood can supply that. But I think that you have to take into account movies like, Red Dragon, or like the Hannibal Lecter series especially has been effective. But a part of the reason why it's effective is because, yes, you have psychopath versus psychopath, but what you really have is psychopath versus everybody else.
Right.
And those people don't think like a psychopath.
Right.
And that's I think that power struggle is what makes these movies fascinating to watch, but also difficult to take in, which I think makes them powerful, because I think you can comprehend them on some level, but on another level you're challenged by them and you're excited by them.
Well, and actually, just to answer the second half of the question,
yes,
where just the controversial elements at times come through, is that you don't get any sense of that when you're watching a Hollywood movie. When
you're watching something like I Know What You Did Last Summer, there's no controversy.
No,
let's be honest.
But that's what's so great about this genre.
Yes.
I mean, because it will have some kind of realism to it that has to do with real life.
Yes.
Did you ever see? I don't like to recommend this because it's just so. It's a cult favorite, and I can see why. I Spit on Your Grave.
I've not seen I Spit on Your Grave.
Well, I saw parts of that. I can only watch it in portions. Even for a 90-minute film, I can only watch it in portions, and there's a good reason why.
Well, but you know what I think too, like the things, like I think what was thrilling about a lot of the films that we watched today is the controversy was sociopolitical. Right. When you're talking about, and I go back to Deadly Sweet, when you talk about Deadly Sweet, or when you talk about The Crack in the Earth, which I think out of all the ones that we've talked about, these two were larger films. I think what's fascinating about them and what makes them sort of interesting to watch is that they are they're saying something controversial. Asking, can a woman kill? Even in 1968, it's very controversial. Since Lizzie Borden, we knew women could kill. Right. It's out there. Right. But what they're really asking is, can an attractive young woman that everybody wants to have sex with kill? Right. That's what they want. That's what they want to know, and that's what's controversial about it. I think in a lot of ways, from a feminist point of view, it certainly didn't serve that audience, which is almost what makes it great as a shock cinema value, because there is that shock of you're actually boldly stating that you don't believe this, that there are white men out there who don't believe that young girls can kill. Right. I mean, it's not controversial, really, because the truth is these guys are out there. And I think what shock cinema is doing is also putting a camera on that and saying, it happens. These guys exist. This girl exists. Let's put them in one movie and let's just blow it up. Right. Right. And I think with The Crack in the Earth, it was sort of the question of the danger of the atomic bomb, because they were still curious about that in the 60s and 70s. And I think there was still a question of, they didn't know what was in the Earth's core. Like if you watch the kitschy scenes where they're lowering down and they're yelling up to each other, and you're like, that's got to be like 5 million miles. How are they yelling up to each other? Right. You know how little they knew about the world, and that was truth. Right. That was truth. I mean, the whole thing that one portion of the world can just be blown away and the oceans aren't going to fall in and everything isn't going to be extinguished is ludicrous. Right. But for whatever reason, that was what they wanted to explore, and that's what they did. And it was nonsense, and it was something that just showed the lack of what people knew about the Earth in 1968. I believe it was 68. And that was what I thought was interesting about those films is there is truth. There's a lot of truth, and it's unrelenting. And I don't think that Hollywood can be relentless in its pursuit of truth, because I think when it does, it forces it on you. Right.
But see, it forces you on a way that I think is horrendous. I don't think there's anything that's remotely redeeming. This is just my own personal perspective. I don't think there's anything remotely redeeming about how they do their films. Yeah. I mean, when they come out with the Academy Awards in the next few weeks, I mean, it was hard for me to pick my favorite movies. Yes. Because I don't think they picked the right ones. I don't think they picked the right directors for the nominees. I don't think they picked the right best supporting actors. Yeah. I think they are missing out on a whole other level of people that deserve that award, that deserve that nomination, even if they don't win. They deserve the nomination.
Well, and I think that's been true, especially for Aronofsky up until this year. With Black Swan, obviously, he's broken through that barrier. But I got to say, I've seen a ton of Aronofsky films that totally got blown off by the critics and the Academy that were amazing, and he's not afraid to push the boundaries, and he's not afraid to go there without touting to the Academy. And I think the problem with Hollywood is like most big businesses, it is a very small town, and you have to pander to the right people with the right amount of money in their pocket. And I think where Shock Cinema offers a relent to that is, aside from your Bernard Knowles, you have a lot of people who are not terribly well connected and are doing the best with the people they know and with what they can do, and they're not really afraid of who they're going to please with this. Where I think Academy Award movies are so formulaic at this point. You know, like there's a joke, you know, in Ricky Gervais Extras where he says to Kate Winslet, like, well, if you go World War II, you'll she says you'll play World War II, you'll win an Academy Award. Or there was like one of the extras, somebody said, you know, if you play a near retard but not a retard, you'll get an Academy Award. And I'm sorry, but as much as I love the movies that were this year, I was actually very pleased with both the Golden Globes. I love the Golden Globes more than the Academy Awards because I like to see people drunk. But you know, but I feel like with Black Swan, Aronofsky's broken through that. With you know, with Temple Grandin, you know, there's that. But you go back to The Reader or something for a few years ago, and you go, yeah, Kate Winslet's a great actress. Don't get me wrong, but don't give her an Academy Award for something she did years ago for this movie. You know, that's where they get caught in a trap.
Well, see, that's the thing. I loved film. Just to go back to Aronofsky for a second.
Yes.
I loved Pi.
Oh, okay. I've not seen Pi.
You haven't seen Pi?
Yeah.
That was so good. Black and white, just the way it's supposed to be. You know, you get another off-kilter guy who literally just shuns himself away from the rest of the world. He's got all his computers around him, and it's fascinating, mathematically, socially, anti-socially. It's ingenious. I have it at home on DVD. I got it for like $5.
Of course.
You know, but it was amazing.
Yeah. I
mean, I think that was kind of like the equivalent to that Shock. I forget what it's called. It was by Kenny McKinney. Oh my goodness! It's from going back to like 2000, 2001. But I'll think of it in a minute.
I love how you are an archive of Shock film references.
Oh, thanks.
It's genius.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
But Kenny, I love Kenny's work. I think if it wasn't for stuff like scare flicks and him being the ingenious sci-fi kind of shock horror kind of thing, I don't think he would. He came later in life, I mean, after the 60s and 70s, but I think he kept it going. I love scare flicks.
Yeah.
I will get anything from scare flicks. I will buy any one of those films, no matter how much they cost.
Yeah.
Because I think their stuff is so good, so controversial, and I understand what you were saying about Hollywood movies, I do. But by the same token, though, yes, it's formulaic, yes, but they make as less sense than these guys do, which is surprising because it's true.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I wish Hollywood would push the boundaries just a little bit. I don't mean go as far as this, but I mean push the boundaries a little bit and see what the audience does, see what the critics do.
But I think sometimes the problem is, and this could come from I like everything with a little bit of sugar. I like my happy endings, you know. Which I thought a couple of these movies had ridiculous happy endings just out of nowhere, just right through the nose.
Right.
But I think what's difficult for me sometimes when Hollywood tries to push the boundaries is it comes out of nowhere at a time when it's not necessary. I feel like a lot of these movies, the whole point of you go into a Shock Cinema, you know, theater going, I want to be shocked. Yes. I want you to pull out. I want you to cut someone's arm off for no reason. I want you to have the leering sex scene. You know, there's always the voyeur in Shock Cinema. I want that in Shock Cinema. Okay. But I don't need it in a big Hollywood film for no reason.
I don't mean like I don't mean that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't mean bring the shock into major motion pictures. But what I mean is that I want to see at least an element of it.
Yeah.
Something that's tangible, something that's intelligent. Because even at times I'm sitting there, you know, in front of a big screen wondering I should just go home and watch a B movie.
Well, and speaking of which, you were talking. One of the questions that we have is the difference between B movies and independents. Where do you think that line is drawn?
The line is drawn is due to the fact that yes, they're both low budget. There's a similarity, but there's the independent. There's Hollywood. There's independent, and then there's B movie.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want bottom of the barrel, then hey, you know, have your pick. There's a million of them. But where the line is drawn between independent and B movie is that there's a certain kind of, how do you say it, flavor to an independent film. I love independent films. My last show that I did was, my entire lineup of shows that I've done on my original show was all about small, independent documentary films. I love that thing because I can go on either end of the spectrum. I can get all whacked out over shock cinema, but then I can jump onto something that's a little more sophisticated, and I could go to independent.
But I would argue that independent is not a genre; it is a pay grade.
It is, but by the same token, it is its own genre.
I don't know about that. I think anytime a film is a little bit off kilter, or or costs less money to make, they say here's an independent film, and they call a lot of foreign films independent, and and they're not necessarily. They could be huge budget films, and a lot of in this day and age, especially, independent films are filmed by actually pushed by bigger film companies, and they're given money by bigger film companies. And I think the line is blurred. I don't think it's a genre anymore. I think it's just a title that they give something to appeal to a certain audience. I almost think it's a marketing campaign.
Right. But see, that's why I call it a genre, because it's a genre within itself. It's like with shock cinema. Shock cinema has its own variety of film noir.
But see, I think it's loose to say, like, people have called The Black Swan independent. Sure. They've called The King's Speech independent. Right. But then you have movies like, what's the one that they love to play at the Coolidge Theater?
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
With the guy with the room or whatever.
Yes.
You know, that is, and The Human Centipede.
Right.
You know, The Human Centipede is more of a shock film than it will ever be an independent film. It's more of a horror film than it'll ever. It's a horror film. It's not an independent film just because it was made on a lower budget. No. It's a horror film.
It is a horror film, but it's a horror film made on an independent budget. And
I just think it's the budget. I don't think it's the genre. And I think the budget, it's even loosely termed because a lot of these independent films have big movie budgets.
Oh, they do. But The Human Centipede was only made on what, $100,000? I mean, because
it didn't need any more money.
No, it didn't need any more money, and I agree with you.
And see, I think that's just what it costs to make it. I don't think it's a genre.
I didn't bother to see it in the theater because it wasn't worth seeing in the theater.
No, I mean, you know what's going to happen.
But the thing, I rented it for $5, and it was exactly what. There's no hold back.
Yeah.
It was exactly what they would. It's expected what you were wanting. The critics didn't like it. The audiences didn't like it. No one liked it.
No. Why would you like that?
Well, exactly. But that's the thing about shock cinema. It's in its own world, and that's what makes it so great. You know, it has its own world, and the only reason I call it independent films. Just to go back to that for a second, the reason I call it its own genre.
But don't you think sometimes independent films are mislabeled?
Yes, they are. I agree with you fully.
And I feel like, I mean, as I say, I don't believe it's a genre, but I believe each of those are different kinds of movies that happen to be qualified as independent because of a certain budget.
Right.
But I think sometimes they're I would not consider that an independent film. I consider that maybe a shock or a genre of its own. It's really
But see, it stands on its own.
Yeah.
There's nothing to balance it. It's torn. I mean, yes, you can call it for shock value, but what did you call it, a shock cinema? No,
because they tell you what happens going in.
Exactly, but see, that's the thing, because you know what's going to happen, and the brutality of it, which is the right word for The Human Centipede, the brutality of it is, that's the thing, that's why it didn't scare me all that much, because I've seen stuff like that before. It's not going to be the end of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, The Human Centipede had no real effect on me, per se. I've seen stuff similar to that.
Yeah.
But the thing, what's so great about The Human Centipede is that it stands on its own two legs. Its
own how many legs?
Two. Because it's torn between two genres.
No. Human Centipede, how many
8.
legs?
I know what you're talking about. Listen, I've seen those many times over, even as a kid, plenty of times. But I'm just talking about the film itself.
Right.
It's torn between two genres.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to define which one it comes from, or how to obtain it. Well, listen, thank you so much, Holly, for coming and being my guest host, my guest co-host for today's show.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for coming. This is Daniel Berman with another edition of the Hollywood Backlot, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.